In the annals of military history, few victories resonate with such finality as the Battle of Waterloo. On June 18, 1815, two titans of war faced each other across the Belgian countryside. One was Napoleon Bonaparte, the master of Europe, who had conquered nations and toppled kings. The other was Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, a methodical Irish-born general who had proved to be Napoleon's nemesis. This is the story of the Iron Duke, whose unwavering resolve and tactical brilliance ended the Napoleonic era and reshaped the destiny of Europe. Arthur Wellesley was born on May 1, 1769, in Dublin, into an Anglo-Irish aristocratic family. His father, Garrett Wesley, was the first Earl of Mornington, a musician and composer who died when Arthur was just 12. His mother, Anne Hill Trevor, was a stern woman who showed little affection for her third son, famously declaring that she could not understand how such a dull boy could be her child. The family faced financial difficulties, and young Arthur was often overshadowed by his elder brothers. He attended Eton College, but was considered an unremarkable student, quiet and withdrawn, with little indication of the greatness that lay ahead. With limited prospects as a younger son, Arthur was commissioned as an ensign in the British Army in 1787 at the age of 18. His mother purchased him a commission in the 73rd Highland Regiment, viewing military service as suitable for her unremarkable son. Wellington later reflected that his early military career was marked by frivolity and gambling, rather than serious study of warfare. He served briefly in Ireland before being posted to India in 1796 as a lieutenant colonel. It was in the harsh landscapes of the subcontinent that the future Duke of Wellington would forge his military genius, learning the arts of logistics, native politics, and unconventional warfare that would serve him throughout his career. In India, Wellesley began to display the methodical approach that would define his military philosophy. He studied maps obsessively, mastered supply lines, and developed an intimate understanding of terrain. His victories at Seringapatam in 1799 and Assaye in 1803 established his reputation as a formidable commander. The Battle of Assaye, fought against the Maratha Confederation, was particularly significant. Facing overwhelming odds with only 7,000 men against 40,000 enemy troops, Wellesley employed brilliant tactical positioning and fierce personal courage to achieve victory. He later called Assaye his finest battle, even greater than Waterloo. These Indian campaigns taught him that preparation, intelligence, and defensive positioning could overcome Wellington's personal life was marked by duty rather than passion. In 1806, he married Catherine Pakenham, his childhood sweetheart, after a lengthy engagement interrupted by his military service. The marriage was not particularly happy. Catherine was described as plain and intellectually unstimulating, while Wellington was often absent on campaign. They had 2 sons, but Wellington remained emotionally distant from his family. His true relationships were with his officers and soldiers, whom he led with a combination of stern discipline and genuine care for their welfare. He was known for his sharp wit, aristocratic bearing, and unshakable composure under fire. His soldiers called him Old Hooky for his prominent nose, and later the Iron Duke for his resolve. Wellington's reputation reached its zenith during the Peninsular War from 1808 to 1814. Napoleon had installed his brother Joseph as King of Spain, but Portuguese and Spanish resistance, supported by British forces, created a persistent drain on French resources. Wellington commanded the British forces with methodical brilliance, employing his signature defensive tactics and the innovative lines of Torres Vedras, a series of fortifications protecting Lisbon. His victories at Talavera, Salamanca, and Vitoria demonstrated his mastery of defensive warfare and strategic withdrawal. Unlike Napoleon's aggressive style, Wellington preferred to fight from prepared positions, using terrain to his advantage and allowing the enemy to exhaust themselves in futile attacks. The Peninsular Campaign showcased Wellington's greatest strengths: meticulous planning, exceptional logistics, and an intimate knowledge of his enemy. He created an extensive intelligence network, often personally reconnoitering enemy positions. His use of the reverse slope tactic, hiding his troops behind ridges to protect them from artillery, became legendary. Wellington understood that war was won through careful preparation rather than brilliant improvisation. He ensured his soldiers were properly fed, equipped, and paid, creating loyalty through competence rather than charisma. By 1814, his forces had pushed the French entirely out of Spain, earning him promotion to field marshal and the title Duke of Wellington. Napoleon's abdication in April 1814 seemed to end the great conflict, but the peace was short-lived. In March 1815, Napoleon escaped from Elba and returned to France, beginning the 100 Days that would culminate at Waterloo. Wellington was in Vienna attending the Congress when news arrived of Napoleon's return. He immediately began organizing the Seventh Coalition, bringing together British, Prussian, Austrian, and Russian forces. The stage was set for a final confrontation between two masters of warfare who had never faced each other directly in battle. Wellington knew that defeating Napoleon would require all his accumulated experience and tactical genius. The campaign of 1815 began with Napoleon's invasion of Belgium, attempting to defeat the Allied armies before they could fully unite. On June 16th, Napoleon struck the Prussians at Ligny, while Marshal Ney engaged Wellington's forces at Quatre Bras. Wellington skillfully withdrew his army to the ridge of Mont Saint-Jean, near the village of Waterloo, where he had previously identified strong defensive ground. He positioned his forces along the reverse slope of the ridge, with 3 strong points anchoring his line: the Château of Hougomont, the farm of La Haye-Sainte, and the village of Papelotte. Wellington's plan was simple: hold his positions until the Prussians under Blucher could arrive to support his eastern flank. The Battle of Waterloo began at 11:30 a.m. on June 18, 1815. Napoleon delayed his attack, hoping the ground would dry from the previous night's rain, a decision that would prove crucial. The battle opened with a massive French assault on Hougomont, intended as a diversion but which drew significant French resources. Napoleon then unleashed a grand battery of 84 guns against Wellington's center, followed by d'Erlon's corps attacking the Allied left center. Wellington's infantry, formed in squares to repel cavalry in lines to maximize firepower, held firm, despite enormous pressure. Throughout the day, Wellington rode along his lines, repositioning units, encouraging his men, and maintaining the cohesion of his forces through sheer force of personality and tactical acumen. The afternoon brought Napoleon's cavalry charges, led by Marshal Ney, who mistakenly believed Wellington's army was retreating. Wave after wave of French cavalry crashed against the British squares, but Wellington's disciplined infantry held firm. As the Prussians began arriving on Napoleon's eastern flank, the Emperor made his final gambit, sending forward the Imperial Guard, his elite veterans who had never tasted defeat. Wellington waited until the Guard was within 50 yards before ordering his own guards to rise and fire. The sight of the Imperial Guard retreating broke the morale of the French army. Wellington then gave the signal for the general advance, personally leading his forces forward as the French army collapsed into rout. As night fell on June 18, 1815, the Napoleonic era ended forever. Wellington and Blucher met at the Inn of La Belle Alliance, where the Prussian field marshal congratulated his British counterpart on their shared victory. The cost had been enormous: over 65,000 casualties across both armies, including many of Wellington's closest friends and finest officers. Wellington himself was deeply affected by the carnage, later writing that nothing except a battle lost can be half so melancholy as a battle won. Napoleon abdicated 4 days later and was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he would spend his remaining years reflecting on his defeat by the methodical Duke who had proven his equal. Following Waterloo, Wellington became one of the most celebrated figures in Europe, but he found peacetime less congenial than war. He served as a diplomat and politician, becoming Prime Minister of Britain from 1828 to 1830. His political career was marked by the same rigid principles that had defined his military service, including his opposition to parliamentary reform and Catholic emancipation, positions that made him unpopular with the changing times. He never fully adapted to the democratic politics of the 19th century, preferring the clear hierarchies and defined objectives of military command. Despite political setbacks, he remained the embodiment of duty, service, and aristocratic honor until his death. Wellington died on September 14, 1852, at Walmer Castle in Kent, where he served as Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports. His last words were reportedly, "Yes, if you please," spoken to his valet. He was 83 years old and had lived to see the transformation of Europe that his victory at Waterloo had made possible. His state funeral was one of the grandest in British history, with over 1 million people lining the streets of London to pay their respects. He was buried in St. Paul's Cathedral near Admiral Nelson, another hero of the Napoleonic Wars. Even in death, Wellington maintained the dignity and composure that had characterized his extraordinary life. The Duke of Wellington's legacy extends far beyond his military victories. He embodied a particular conception of leadership, methodical, unflappable, and founded on meticulous preparation rather than inspirational rhetoric. His defensive tactics revolutionized military thinking, proving that disciplined troops in strong positions could defeat even the most aggressive and numerically superior forces. Wellington's emphasis on logistics, intelligence, and careful planning became fundamental principles of modern warfare. More broadly, his victory at Waterloo ushered in a century of relative European peace, allowing for unprecedented economic, social, and cultural development. The Iron Duke had not merely defeated Napoleon.